Ever heard of a country where the word intellectual was banned? Where a president declared himself president for life and then spent the nation's entire treasury on himself? This isn't a dystopian movie plot. This is the incredible and terrifying true story of Francisco Macías Nguema, the first president of Equatorial Guinea. Get ready, because this story is a wild ride from a humble village to absolute, terrifying power. Born in 1924 in what was then a Spanish colony, Macías Nguema's early life gave little hint of the monster he would become. His father was a traditional healer, and young Francisco attended Catholic schools. He worked his way up, first as a court clerk, then an interpreter. He was clever, and the Spanish colonial administration saw potential in him. They promoted him rapidly, mayor of the capital, Malabo, then minister of public works, and finally, a top government official. He was the local man the Spanish believed they could trust. By the late 1960s, the winds of change were blowing across Africa. Spain was under pressure to grant Equatorial Guinea its independence. In 1968, they held elections, and Francisco Macías Nguema, the man they had groomed, won. On October 12, 1968, as the new flag was raised, he was sworn in as the nation's very first president. It was a moment of hope, a new dawn for a new nation. But that dawn would quickly turn into a very long, very dark night. Almost immediately, President Nguema began to tighten his grip. The first step for any aspiring dictator: consolidate power. He surrounded himself with allies, promoting them to key positions. Anyone who showed even a hint of opposition was gone, replaced by people loyal only to him. Their skills didn't matter, only their loyalty. This was just the beginning. The mask was starting to slip. In 1971, the floodgates opened. Nguema unleashed a series of decrees that transformed him from a president into a king. Decree 415 gave him all powers of government, all of them. Law 1 made it official. Any threat against the president was punishable by death, and if you merely insulted him, you'd get 30 years in prison. The system of checks and balances was dismantled, piece by terrifying piece. The next year, 1972, he took it even further. On July 14th, he issued a decree making Equatorial Guinea a one-party state. And guess who was the head of that party? For life, you guessed it. Francisco Macías Nguema was now officially president for life. To make it all seem legitimate, he held a referendum in 1973. The result? A 99.9% approval rating, vesting absolute power in him. How do you get 99.9% approval? You make sure no one dares to vote no. With total control, Nguema turned the national treasury into his personal piggy bank. There was zero accountability. He spent lavishly on himself, his family, and his cronies. While the country's economy began to crumble, a bizarre cult of personality was manufactured. He was no longer just a president. He was a godlike figure, the unique miracle of Equatorial Guinea. But behind the titles and the propaganda, a deep-seated paranoia was festering. Nguema distrusted anyone smarter than him. He hated intellectuals, the Catholic Church, even his own ministers. In 1975, he made his hatred official. Decree 6 outlawed private education, calling it subversive. He outlawed Christianity and used the slogan, sometimes claimed to be the national motto, "There is no other God than Macias." He then banned the use of European names and, most absurdly, outlawed the very word intellectual. You couldn't even say it. He also banned Western medicine, forcing people to rely on traditional practices, a chilling echo of his father's profession. By the mid-70s, Nguema's paranoia had boiled over into outright terror. He became violent, unpredictable, a madman ruling through fear. By 1979, his servants stated that Macías Nguema had become increasingly withdrawn. He wandered in his villa, repeatedly saying the names of his victims and worshipping a collection of heads as per Fang tradition, hoping that this would grant him powers. There were even more disturbing report of Macias ordering a meal and table to be prepared for 8 guests. But he sat at the table alone, casually talking with the dead. He had something really spooky going on. Persecutions and executions became commonplace. Human rights abuses were rampant. People started to flee, thousands of them. In response, Nguema didn't fix the problems. He simply banned ocean fishing to destroy the boats people were using to escape his island prison. The statistics are staggering. By 1977, over 2/3 of the national legislators had been killed. At least 10 of his own former government ministers were executed. Out of a population estimated at between 300,000 and 400,000, it's estimated that nearly 80,000 people were killed during his reign. 1 in 4. It was a bloodbath, a genocide hidden from the world's view. The world eventually started to notice. In 1979, the United Nations finally condemned Nguema's brutal regime. Feeling isolated, he turned to one of the few places that would help a dictator like him, North Korea. In a strange twist, he sent his own wife and 3 children to live in Pyongyang for their safety. One of his daughters, Monique, would later write a book about her surreal 15 years growing up there, titled I'm Monique of Pyongyang, but Nguema's time was running out. The very system he had built to protect himself would be his undoing. On August 3, 1979, his own nephew, Teodoro Obiang Nguema Mbasogo, a military governor he had put in power, had had enough. He organized a coup for several agonizing days. Francisco Macias Nguema was on the run. The unique miracle was reduced to a fugitive hiding in a forest. On August 18th, they found him. The once omnipotent dictator was captured and thrown in prison. A military tribunal was assembled. The charges were read out, including genocide, mass murder, embezzlement of public funds, treason, and violations of human rights. The evidence was overwhelming. The verdict was swift. On September 29, 1979, the 55-year-old Francisco Macias Nguema was sentenced to death. But there was a problem, because Macías Nguema reportedly swore that his ghost would return and take revenge on those who had condemned him. Due to this, the Equatorial Guinean soldiers refused to shoot him. To solve this problem, a group of hired Moroccan troops were instead engaged to carry out the sentence. The story of Macías Nguema is a chilling reminder of how quickly a nation's hope can be twisted into a nightmare, and how absolute power can corrupt absolutely. Thank you for watching this deep dive into one of history's most brutal, yet lesser known, dictators. If you found this story as fascinating as I did, please hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible stories from the past. Let me know in the comments what you think, and we'll see you in the next video.